We have in studio today Michael Matonti. Michael's a friend. Actually, I know you mainly as a member of a dance group here at Laguna Woods Village. And I also know that people used to call you Brooklyn.
Yeah.
And that's because you were born in Brooklyn.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
And to differentiate me from another good friend that lives here who's from New Jersey. So I was Brooklyn Mike and he was Jersey Mike.
Oh, okay, Jersey Mike. That sounds like a sandwich shop.
Yeah. And it is.
It is, yeah. We're interviewing Michael in this particular season because this is 50 years later from the Apollo 11 moonshot. Yeah. And Michael was part of that whole thing, and he's going to tell us some of the story. But let's go back a little bit first. And
sure.
You said you were born in Brooklyn.
Yep.
And what was it like growing up there?
Well, as anybody can, in my age bracket, can remember the 50s, it was actually probably one of the best times in our history to be a child.
I remember
lots were going on, and big things were happening.
Yeah.
The space program, the concept of going out into space was just starting, and so.
Did you find yourself being interested in space early on as a child?
Yeah, actually I found in my mother's memorabilia those little books you'd get when you were born where they'd write, your first this and your first that. And so my first present was a moon man.
Oh, okay.
Whatever that meant, I don't know what the toy would have been. So yeah, it started back a long time ago.
Almost prophetic in a sense.
Yeah.
You went to public schools, did you? And, and then college?
I'm a big fan and very proud of having a whole life in public schools, particularly in New York. And it speaks to the times now where people think we can't do things. But I literally got the best education you could want. Going to a top-rate university, City College in New York, was considered one of the best in the country, with incredible professors, and all of it was free.
Wow.
So I got out of school virtually not paying a dime. In City College, I pay $50 a term for student fees.
Wow.
And about $50 for books. Other than that, no charge.
And I remember at the same time, I think California education, state colleges were pretty much free too.
Yeah.
Times have changed.
Well, and if I think about my career and what I've done with it and working on the space program, I gave back. So it wasn't like you were giving something for nothing. You were creating a well-educated workforce and community that was going to be able to do good things.
Now, I think you told me that you were an electrical engineering a major, and I was too, but I gave it up, but you stayed with it.
All my friends were out partying, and I was up till 2, 3 in the morning doing homework for every class, and whether it was a liberal arts class or a technical class, every professor considered his class the most important.
Of course.
And so there was no leniency. And so as part of my curriculum, I really was exposed to all of the engineering disciplines. So I took civil engineering courses, strength of materials, lots of mechanical engineering. So when I came out, I really was a truly well-rounded engineer, capital E, not a specialist.
And that was beneficial in your work in
my
the
whole
space
career,
program.
Particularly at Grumman. I was able to converse with people in the structural areas, and they knew I could understand their issues.
That is a major problem, isn't it, in any high-tech field, is that you have all these specialists that have their own language and their own ways of doing things, and they can't always communicate among each other.
Yeah, so being able to, for instance, at one point, to go off on a little bit of a tangent, I worked for Intelsat in their program office. Their communication satellites were built up in the Bay Area at Loral. And they had a big program office with thermodynamicists, structural engineers, electrical engineers for the antenna propagation. But I was able to talk to all of them. And I had to write software for the whole group. And they hired me. They said, we hire programmers, but they don't understand what our needs really are.
Uh-huh.
You're the first person we've had here that's really on our side.
All right.
So,
Let's jump back just a little
Yeah.
bit. And generally, you get out of college, get that first job as kind of a junior person. And how long did it take you to move from college into the space program? Because it's pretty high prestige.
Well, and that's an interesting story in itself. Friends of mine that had graduated either 6 months or a year before me, good friends, told me that if you go in, especially into aerospace, in a big aerospace company, they said, you're not going to do anything for 6 months. They're going to put you in a room reading manuals, learning about systems, talking to people, just getting the lay of the land. It's a long process. So first 2 or 3 days, I'm reading manuals, kind of basically finding out where the restrooms are.
Right.
Assuming I'd be on an aircraft program like the A6 Intruder. I didn't think I'd be anywhere near the space program.
Right.
On the 4th day, my home section boss comes up to me and says, Mike, there's an opening on the Luna module. Someone's leaving, and we need a replacement. You're it.
Whoa.
So 4 days after leaving college,
Oh my gosh.
and with all of this, all of my friends telling me that I'll be doing nothing,
Right.
I literally was put into the hotbed.
So
But-
exciting times.
Exciting, and what I will say though, and it speaks to companies back then, almost every company, Grumman, while he was retired, Leroy Grumman was still alive.
Oh.
Douglas Aircraft, Jack Douglas was still alive.
Yeah.
Boeing, the people, the original founders. At Grumman, Jake Swerble and I forget who the other person was. Leroy Grumman and 2 other people were the basic founders of Grumman. They were still in the executive boardroom.
But these aircraft companies really came into their own during the Second World War, and this isn't all that long after that. So
Well, and the people there, a lot of them had that longevity. So I was working with people that were incredible mentors.
Wow.
And because Grumman, besides the space program, really was a team company that permeated every level of Grumman. Grumman and the Navy were almost one. They weren't the adversary. Grumman was considered a Navy house and was considered to build some of the finest products going.
Yeah. People are aware of NASA and JPL and these government or quasi-government organizations, but I think a lot of people don't realize that most of the work in creating and designing and building these things were not done by NASA.
No.
They were done by contractors, companies like Grumman and the others that you mentioned that actually did the work.
You get in a sense of some companies and in a commercial environment where people keep things close to the vest. If there's a problem, they don't want to let anybody know about it till they resolve it or they make little of it. That was never the case on the space program.
Now, were you involved in space shots before Apollo 11?
Oh yeah, no. From the
what
time
were some
I
of
joined,
the early ones? Yeah.
Well, I joined Grumman before the first vehicle was manufactured. So I've been in every lunar module that's flown.
Wow.
Many times with the primary crew. Like the first manned Apollo, the first lunar module that flew was LEM-1. It was unmanned, and it was so successful that they skipped the second unmanned mission. Again, we were in a critical race to get to the moon.
There was a huge sense of competition with Soviet Russia at this time.
So we weren't thinking so much, in the day-to-day, we were just thinking about we're going to get to the moon by the end of the decade. So LEM-1 was very successful. So LEM-2 wasn't necessary, and LEM-2 is the one that is in the Smithsonian.
Oh, okay.
So it's the only fully assembled that would have flown the LEM that exists.
Yeah.
Well, anyhow, so the first manned mission was LEM-3.
Yeah.
And that was Jim Mcdivitt and Rusty Schweickart. Rusty Schweickart was a very unique, tall, red-headed guy. He was called Red Rover on the mission. And if you see Apollo 13 or the new Apollo 11, if you see a Capcom in the control room that's tall and thin with red hair,
that's him.
They're portraying Rusty Schweickart.
Ah.
Whenever I see any of the real videos, I say, oh, there's Rusty. So I spent hours in the vehicle with Jim Mcdivitt and Rusty when we were testing LEM 3 before the mission.
Yeah.
And that was an Earth orbital mission, so that never left the Earth's environment. And then there was LEM 4, which was Apollo 10, which went into a dress rehearsal. It actually went to the moon, detached from the command module, went down to 10,000 feet, didn't land, it didn't have enough fuel to do that, but they wanted to test the detachment, going to lower lunar orbit, and then coming back and rendezvousing. They were playing it safe. And then, of course, the next one was Apollo 11.
Right.
And then all the missions after that, including he wrote a book called The Last Man on the Moon, Gene Cernan. And I was in the cabin with him, too. So for the last lunar module that was shipped.
So you were up close and personal.
Oh, yeah. and they were all John Young, who was from the Gemini missions, too, and then the space shuttle. And some of them, Rusty was a great guy. John Young was a real gentleman. And one of the guys I remember most was Charlie Duke, who flew on missions. He was in the cabin with, I think it was Jim Mcdivitt and Rusty Schweickart. He was sitting, this thing is made for two people. So there are the two astronauts. I'm standing in between them, kind of like in a subway car.
Fortunately, you're not too wide.
And in the back, there's a aft compartment with a cylindrical engine cover. And Charlie Duke is sitting in there kind of scrunched over because it's really a small area. He was so enthusiastic. I think that was the first time he was in a live lunar module. And he was just looking all over like, oh, look at this. Oh, look at that. I said, he's like a kid, but like we all were really.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah. So yeah, I was responsible for running tests in the vehicle and writing test plans and stuff. And
I mean, this was exciting, but it was also deadly serious. Because
every moment of
and
those
death.
5 years, when I went to sleep at night, I always worried, did I do everything right?
Yeah.
There was never a thought of not trying to do 110%. Because the smallest thing, the smallest electrical problem could be catastrophic.
It's tiny things, so seemingly not very important things.
Well, and I'll give you, for instance, the kind of the level of thought that went into this, the quality of the engineering and the knowledge. If anybody's used to fasteners and stuff, cadmium plating is used because it prevents corrosion. So you can go to a hardware store and get, cadmium plated nuts and bolts. They were forbidden inside the crew compartment. There's a phenomenon called outgassing. Under vacuum, even things that you would consider benign can outgas. Particles, like for instance a coating, particles can come off that coating under vacuum.
And that's how
cadmium
we smell
is toxic.
Oh, yeah.
So no cadmium in the vehicle.
So a lot to think about.
Well, that wasn't my field. Being the inquisitive person and having all this knowledge around me, I learned a lot more than I would have if I was the type of person that I'm just going to do my job and not pay attention to everything else. I was in the main place, which is where the lunar modules were fabricated, was in Bethpage, Long Island. And
not too far from your original home.
Well, far enough that when until I got my own apartment in Queens, a little further, a little closer, it was a 50-mile trip each way. So basically, every day to go to work, I did 100 miles.
Wow!
Plus the long hours at work. Some of those days I'd be coming home very late at night, which was better in New York traffic. But also, for instance, for testing, when I mentioned qualification testing, there were several places on Long Island where we could do the testing. And testing might involve vacuum, thermal testing, salt spray. You'd say, well, why salt spray? They're going to the moon. But these things are going to be sitting at Cape Canaveral, where you're in a sea air environment. Sand was another test, where they'd have a very fine particle sand, and they'd spray it in the chamber to see if things that were supposed to be sealed would get any sand in them. Now you'd say, well, what happens there? But again, you're in Florida, and stuff is being transported all over the country that there's sand in the air.
Wow.
And you don't want it getting into the equipment.
Right, yeah.
So, but anyhow, there were test labs on Long Island where I'd spend long hours staring into vacuum chambers.
Now, would you go down to Cape Canaveral for the shoots? Or?
Not for the shoots, but for different tasks. Like I was down there when we were, one of my responsibilities was the docking target on the lunar module, and also the alignment site where in the lunar module they could look out, there was a docking target in the command module if they had to use the lunar module as the primary docker. And so I was also responsible for the, basically like a heads-up display, a little alignment site that they put in the window. So when they would, before they would launch, they would actually mate the two vehicles. And because the LEM was so fragile, they would use it and the base, they take the command module with a lifting crane, turn it upside down. They'd have a guy suspended upside down in one of the seats and actually dock with the lunar module to make sure that everything was in alignment.
It'd be pretty embarrassing to be up there and
find out.
Whoops, it's a quarter-inch off.
One of the things, it's called oil canning. Now, when a vehicle is under no pressure, the structure is in a certain position.
Right.
When you pressurize it, just as a spacesuit would kind of balloon, there's a minor change. But how much is that minor change? That'll change your alignment positioning. So the things were calibrated to be aligned under pressurization.
Wow.
I actually had to do, as an electrical engineer, a tolerance study from the first fabricated bulkhead on the lunar module through the whole assembly, what the tolerances would be till the docking target was finally installed. So I had to use the math I had in college.
I was going to say, you finally got a chance to use all that math.
Well, and interestingly,
what do you have here?
When I say I had to do a tolerance study, there were no hand calculators or computers. This is what I used.
I haven't seen one of these for quite a while.
This is my original slide rule. It's a K&E Kufelen Essel log duplex decitrig slide rule that I picked up, and I believe I paid at the time, which was very expensive, $22.
Yeah.
But this was the engineering and the engineer's right hand.
Right.
As a matter of fact, this thing had a little tab here, and there was a leather holder. When we'd go to college, we'd wear this.
That's right.
You could see all the engineers because you were walking around like a gunslinger.
Yep.
I actually told a buddy, I said I was going to put a little leather attachment here and strap it around like you would like a 6-gun, and he laughed hysterically.
And for people who don't know what these things are, because they carry calculators with them all the time, but you can do pretty high-level math on one of these things.
Incredible to a lot of decimal places, and you could do square roots, cube roots, multiply 6-place numbers if you wanted to. And it had logarithms on it. It's basically based on logarithms, and I don't want to go into detail on that. But I spent 5 years in college. Late into the evenings when I talk about homework, this is what I was doing it with.
How good. You mentioned there was a Star Wars connection somewhere along the line.
Star Trek, actually.
Star Trek, yes.
Yeah, so one day I was coming into, most of the engineering floors had an engineering services counter where we get pens and vellum and blueprint paper, you know, anything we needed to do our job. So I went up to the engineering counter to maybe pick up a tablet or something. And there was a big sign over the engineering counter that said, "Help save the USS Enterprise from being scuttled."
Oh.
And the Enterprise I thought of at that time, because this was a Navy facility, I mean, basically Grumman was a Navy company, was the aircraft carrier Enterprise, which at the time was a new, fairly new, only very few years old.
Was it likely to be scuttled anytime
I
soon?
go, what's going on here? I go, they're going to put it in mothballs? They just built the thing, you know, and it's our latest aircraft carrier. And so they had a big logbook to sign your signature for this petition.
Ah.
And so I said, of course I'll sign that. So as I signed my name, I look and there was like Mickey Mouse. And I go, wait a minute. It was a serious petition, but it was for the Star Trek Enterprise.
Yes.
They had, after 2 seasons, they were going to take it off the air. And everybody at Grumman was livid about that. So all of the plants, and there were quite a few plants at Grumman, separate buildings, they all had petitions set up. So Grumman was part of the big group.
Okay.
And all the engineers on the Apollo project were part of the big group that pushed to get a 3rd season of Star Trek.
So you helped to save the Enterprise.
We helped to save the Enterprise.
By putting your name on a list with Mickey Mouse and others.
But, you know, it speaks to the times we were in.
Yeah.
Not only did we have the space program going on, Star Trek was a new program talking about going out and exploring space in such a positive way.
Yeah, okay. You brought several show and tell things here. Tell us what you have.
Okay, so let me just go through them.
Okay.
I brought this because I still have it. This is an RCA receiving tube manual. And to kind of show you how quickly things changed, when I was in high school, I was reading this cover to cover just because I was so interested in engineering.
These are vacuum tubes that are used in old radios and televisions and all of that.
And so when I went into college, even though I'm an electrical engineer, and everything from college on was solid state.
And almost nobody even knows what vacuum tubes are anymore.
I actually have a set that I found at someone's garage sale of 5 tubes. I said, you know, I'm just going to keep them just for memorabilia. Then here I have a programmer card that the astronauts would have in the vehicle, and this gives all the codes to program the different events on the primary guidance computer.
Okay.
And it gives you the error codes too.
Wow. So this would be information that the astronauts would need if they had to reprogram something while they're
or if they wanted to look at an error code, maybe when they were on a dark side where they weren't in communication with the Cape.
Who's this handsome guy in the spacesuit here in front of us?
So this is, of course, everybody recognized Snoopy, and this was the mascot for the Apollo program. And this was a doll that, and you can see flight safety there. This would have been the equivalent of that little air conditioning thing they carry when they're going to the capsule. And the little button here, Luna Contact, didn't come with the doll. That was my button that Grumman gave us.
Oh, okay.
That's a replica of the contact light that would have gone on the moment they touched the lunar surface. By the way, I was responsible for the real contact light.
Oh, really? Okay.
So when you hear Apollo 11 land, the words you're going to hear are contact light, engine off, and then he says the Eagle has landed.
Right.
So there on 3 of the 4 landing gear, there were these 8-foot-long probes that stuck down from the landing gear. And the idea was when those probes touched, it connected an electric circuit, which turned on this light.
Okay.
And the idea was...
And you got to design that?
Not design it, I was responsible for it.
Okay.
Yeah, it was, you know, supplied by another company. I think that might have been Grimes at the time. Did a lot of aircraft lighting. So when that contact was closed, the light would go on, and when he says engine off, the idea was you wanted to shut the engine before you actually touched the surface. You didn't want any debris thrown up. So they actually shut the engine and then dropped that little bit. So
interesting.
When you hear that point, I was involved in it, which was it's kind of cool for a young kid.
Now, zooming ahead quite a few years, you also had some involvement in the space shuttle program.
Very early on, and that was only with the Grumman proposal for the Grumman was one of the 3 sets of companies that did the proposal for the space shuttle. So I was involved with the mock-up. just before I left Grumman.
Okay.
That was near the end of the Apollo era.
Now, did you work your entire career in aerospace or?
No, not really. I transferred in and out of aerospace and commercial.
Oh, okay.
Which is is unusual in its own right. Normally, aerospace people aren't the first ones that are looked at for commercial companies because you think differently. Mm-hmm. You're used to long duration programs and very meticulous design criteria, whereas commercial people deal with very fast, get it out. You know, you can do another rev
it's
6
a whole
months
different
later.
Culture.
Yeah, and so commercial people don't normally go into aerospace and vice versa. But I was able to very easily go back and forth.
Now, how long have you lived here in Laguna Woods Village, and how did you happen to come here?
Well, kind of circuitous. I was in the Bay Area. When I first came to California, I was in Pasadena for 5 years, working for an aerospace company designing primary flight displays for commercial aircraft. When they had just gone to flat panel displays. All aircraft have flat panel displays now.
Right.
And so the company I worked for built replacement flat panel displays for large commercial aircraft to replace their electromechanical displays.
Wow.
And so I was doing that. From there, I went up to the Bay Area, and I worked as a consultant for Intelsat, doing software for them. But then I worked for commercial companies like Charles Schwab and PG&E and AOL by phone.
Really?
If in the old days you would have called up to Movie Phone or AOL by phone, I did a lot of the voice navigation for the systems.
All right.
But then I was involved in dating someone down here, and eventually I came down here and lived in Laguna Niguel, and then moved to this area.
All right. So you've been here 10 years, I think you said.
Yeah.
And so what do you do to keep out of trouble here in Laguna Woods?
Well, lots of dancing. I still do a lot of computer work.
Do you?
Yeah. And as anybody that knows me knows, I'm an avid bike rider, and I do a lot of travel. So.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming in and sharing your story with us. Very timely here.
My pleasure.
50 years later on Apollo 11, and you were there. You were part of it.
Oh, yeah. And great times, and I worked with a really wonderful group of people.
Thanks for sharing with us. Michael Matonti has been our guest.